Greetings, commanders, and glory to mankind. A lot of commanders have been asking themselves, why do the interceptors that we're fighting outside of Shinrata Desra's main station of Jameson Memorial spin? And spin under very specific circumstances, which is when one or more commanders are actually going to dock. And I've seen the wildest explanations with people talking about people holding aggro, which is not the case, by the way, and all kind of other related issues. So I thought I'd do something that Frontier Developments hasn't really been very good at, which is explain how their game works to the broader community. Don't get me wrong, they're doing amazing things overall. I'm so glad they've gotten rid of most of the grind around engineering. They're really going out of their way to communicate better. So very, very positive feelings about Frontier Developments. But this is one area where they still haven't really caught up to their general sentiment of engaging the community, which is, again, explaining how their game actually works and why it works the way it works. Now, first of all, I am no developer. I have no inside information, but I'm an engineer by training, and I have been playing this game for a long time, in addition to having spent a lot of time looking at the net logs and other information that it spits out. So I had a chance to make some informed observation and learn secondhand, if you will, how some of these things work. So consider all of this that you see here a well-informed theory rather than just merely fact. But again, this is the kind of thing that you can go and test and see for yourself. So by all means, don't feel afraid of contributing to the community's knowledge. If you have thoughts and anything you want to add, by all means, add it to our comments below. We stand on the shoulder of giants, as all scientists would say. Now, let's get down to this. So what is the problem? And what is the problem history? Well, first and foremost, the problem from a design standpoint that developers needed to solve was that Corelli stations and orbit stations and other large stations rotate. And docking in Elite is already pretty hard. At the time when this was originally implemented, you were mostly alone. Wings didn't exist originally in the game and didn't exist until several years later, in fact, for those who were around at the time. The concept of having a combat zone around the station was entirely alien to the game at the time. Thargoids weren't probably even conceived as like a feature in the game at the time, or maybe they were, but again, they came around many years later. So from a design standpoint, what developers had to solve at the time was like, okay, well, we're coming in from space, and now we kind of need to get ourselves into a situation where the environment around us is rotating, and we need to help the player somehow dock, because it's not easy to dock in a rotating setup. If you ever try to do so without rotational correction or in flight assist stuff, you'll know what I mean. So how do we solve for that? Well, we have a computer that is actually running the game, and we can simulate it as far as a ship computer is concerned. So let's introduce something that we'll call rotational correction. Rotational correction is a feature of flight assist, which, by the way, to this day, you can still toggle on and off in your ship settings. There's a toggle button that allows you to enable or disable rotational correction. And it's actually separate from flight assist. It is a subcomponent of flight assist that you can individually disable or enable manually. Now, flight assist off entirely disables your, flight assist, which includes rotational correction. So if you disable flight assist, it will also disable, obviously, rotational correction as well. But it is possible to fly inside a Corelli station with flight assist on, but rotational correction disabled, and that actually gives you a different flight model. You should try it. Give it a try. I actually find that docking in flight assist on with rotational correction off is harder than doing so in flight assist off, but that's my personal feel. Nevertheless, the solution that was implemented at the time was this concept of rotational correction in the ship. But how was that implemented? It was not implemented in the way that you'd imagine, which is, let me actually control the ship thrusters so that basically the ship is thrusting and using its thrusters to counterbalance the rotation of the station, which is what you'd kind of imagine you'd be doing. But instead, a shortcut was taken at the time, which candidly, and we'll get to that in a minute, didn't matter at the time. But the shortcut that was taken was, well, okay, everything is rotation inside the station. So you know what? Why don't we actually shift the frame of reference of pretty much the entire game once we cross the mail slot and have rotational correction enabled, so that essentially the whole system of reference of the game is effectively rotating, and or rather it's at the standstill, and what is rotating instead are now the things that are outside of the station. So we flipped the kind of rotation from we're outside and Coriolis station inside is rotating to we are inside and everything outside is rotating, which simulates the fact that we're kind of still inside and rotating. So that was a shortcut that was taken at the time, and it could be already be observed back in the day because, for example, if you've ever noticed, undocking after you sat on the pad for a while will result in the low wakes that are outside, which are still spinning. So this is not a unique issue to Thargoid interceptors and interceptor combat around station. This has been an issue that has been in the game since its inception. Now, think about it, is it worked fine for a decade. Like, reality is, up until they decided to introduce combat around large stations, it didn't matter at all. Like, this workaround of having the space outside rotating while you inside were not, as a trick if you want to avoid having to code in the ship computer the actual complicated system of rotating space, which had to be counteracted with thrusters while trying to go to a target and dock, which would have resulted by way in flight computers, and all the dock pilots would have blown you up far more than they already used to back in the day. Again, yes, for those who were around back in the day, you will remember that your auto-docking pilot tended to blow you up quite a bit. But again, that was a different time. So anyway, this system worked fine for a decade, and nobody cared because nobody noticed. What happened since then? What happened since then is that the Thargoid War has brought about combat zones around Coriolis orbit and other rotating sessions, which now means that you have commanders that are both inside and outside of a station at a given point in time, while also trying to do something, for instance, shooting interceptors. What happens with that is that reference systems now misalign. So now you have someone who has a reference system that is eventually starting inside and rotating outside, and another commander that may be in the same instance that has a reference system, which is starting outside and rotating inside. That causes problems, and that results in Thargoids spinning. How does it specifically change or apply with regards to Elite's specific netcode? So, and this is a bit more complicated, but it's, I think, pretty interesting because it's like one of those things that isn't generally very well understood. So I'll take a minute to explain this because it'll shed light also on a lot of other things and how a lot of other things work. Many of you know that Elite Dangerous code is so-called peer-to-peer. This was all the rage back then. Like, those were days where like peer-to-peer was like a network solution of the world. Like, it reduces latency, it solves for bandwidth issues. It's amazing. Well, it's not amazing, as we kind of like figured a decade later, for especially for massively multiplayer online games. In fact, it violates a lot of the rules that are essential to modern online gaming design, such as, for example, don't trust the client. That is the number one rule for online gaming, which you cannot actually enforce in a P2P setting because there is no central server that would allow to establish trust. But anyway, we'll get into game design aspects maybe in some other video. Like, what matters for the purpose of this particular video is the understanding that since there is no central server, individual NPCs are held from an authority standpoint with an individual client. So every commander has a share of the individual NPCs in the instance. There is no master or host of the instance, by the way. There's actually the host of individual NPC items within the instance. And the client that holds the hosting, if you want, of that NPC instance is set within the code, and you can see it within the net logs if you look at it in details. It's set to have NPC authority. All the other clients essentially take cue from the client that has NPC authority and are said to have non-authority over a particular NPC. So in a given multiplayer instance within Elite, you will see a lot of traffic between commanders that are sharing essentially NPC information about the different NPCs that they individually hold authority on from a game standpoint. So this is important because if the holder of NPC authority over, say, an interceptor is outside of a station and any other one of the commanders goes into dock, then it doesn't really matter. The Goids will not spin because the system of reference remains the same as the person who has NPC authority is still outside, and everybody else who is still outside fighting the interceptor will basically not see the interceptor spin. However, when the holder of NPC authority does go to dock, everyone that is outside and is an NPC non-authority holder will see the Goid spin. It's important to understand this because it's also completely unrelated to anything that actually happens in the game. It's not related to aggro. It's not related to whether you're shooting it, not shooting it, moving around, close, far, did damage, doing that. Irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is who has NPC authority. And the way NPC authority is established is it's a bit of a distributing system every time a commander enters or leaves the instance. There may be additional rebalancing factors, but they're less common. Like the most common way to change NPC authority in the game is to have a commander join and leave. Every time a client joins a server cluster instance, basically there's a round robin to say how are NPCs distributed, and the game will try to distribute NPC authority so that things are somewhat balanced. Other than that, NPC authority generally doesn't change. So it is what it is. So this is what's happening behind the scenes, and this explains why sometimes, even when a commander goes to dock, you don't see the Thargoids spinning outside. That is because someone who went to dock didn't have NPC authority over the particular interceptor. Unfortunately, there is no way to force NPC authority or to deliberately switch it, which would kind of be an interesting and nice workaround. And there is also no obvious way to see if you have NPC authority over an interceptor other than going and looking at your netlog files, which some developer who is kind of smarter than me and has more available time than me might actually create a little application to be able to tell you in real time, because you can read the logs real time. So you can actually, the information is there. It'll tell you if you actually have NPC authority, but you need to be able to read it in real time, and like scrolling a netlog file with like thousands of lines that are going down every second is not something that is humanly doable. So you need an application that will actually read it for you and kind of say, hey, green light, you don't have authority, or red light, you have authority. Wait until you go dock where everybody else is going to see the Goid spinning. You could do that. But again, that application today doesn't exist. So that is basically how NPC authority works. What are the current workarounds? Like, what do you do about this? And by the way, before we get to this, I will say, because the way rotational correction is implemented and the docking system is implemented today in the game, I don't see this being fixed anytime soon. It is too hard of a fix. By trying to fix this, there's very good chances that you would break auto-docking, and badly, to a point that people would start blowing up when their auto-dock does weird things that are hard to test and edge cases with different ships. So if I was a developer right now of Elite, I would not fix this bug because it's too much work. We know they have limited resources. Trying to fix this just to kind of deal with something that otherwise has a general workaround. Of all the things that they ought to fix that are actually more game disruptive, for example, scythe crashing your game, story for another day, this is actually, at least my personal list of priorities, pretty down on the list of things that must be fixed now. But it is annoying. So what are the workarounds and what can you do about it? Well, the first and foremost, if you only dock in between phases of the anti-Xeno combat zone fight, like for example, in between when interceptors get destroyed and the Hydra spawn, or after each individual Hydra is destroyed, if everybody's docking, the fact that Thargoids are spinning outside or not spinning doesn't matter much, because like you're not disrupting anything. So like as a general kind of like etiquette sort of thing in fighting at Jameson and similar stations, please try to only dock in between the different phases of the fight. It will make the kind of experience overall better for everybody. Now, granted, there are going to be situations where that's not completely feasible, so it is what it is, but try that for a goal if you wish. And then when you do go docking, disable rotational correction and then disable flight assist. Now, in theory, just disabling rotational correction is enough. Personally, I find docking with flight assist and rotational correction off to be extraordinarily difficult. So I personally first disable rotational correction and then also disable flight assist off. It's unclear if just disabling FA off without first disabling rotational correction solves the bug or not. Some folks from Xenocosac Force say that it does not. In particular, Shadow Draikana has done some research on this, and he is reporting that you actually need to disable rotational correction first for the bug to not manifest itself. If you go in with flight assist off without prior having disabled rotational correction, he is saying you still see the bug. And I'm inclined to take his word for it, which is why I'm recommending here disable rotational correction and disable flight assist off, and learn to dock and flight assist off, which, by the way, is hard, but it's fun. And if you're fighting interceptors and kind of like here as part of a war, it's a skill that's like good skill to learn regardless. Why does that matter? That matters because if you are with rotational correction disabled and flight assist off, then you don't have this frame reference shift. So when you are docking and when you are undocking, the bug doesn't manifest itself. The bug is only limited then to a time when you are on the pad, which is a fraction of the time that it takes to go in and out. So it minimizes the impact of a bug, and that's kind of something, again, that we do in the Xenostrike Force, and we would advise the general community to do. And then, again, if you're docking in between phases, not in between phases, as in for some kind of emergency, or if you're being destroyed, which is kind of the same because it docks you if you get blown up, get in and out quick. Like, if you need to turn emissions, do so quickly, pick them up quickly, get in and out. Don't loiter on the pad. By all means, please do not AFK on a pad inside the station. I saw someone on YouTube saying, oh, well, if I can AFK, can I just AFK inside the station? For a load of me, please don't. It will mess with everybody's instance. Don't do that. If you need to AFK in a war zone, please log off. Like, you do not want to AFK in a war zone, especially with the kind of netcode and bug situation that we have here. Please don't. So get in and out quick. Only dock between phases. Disable rotational correction. Find and bind that toggle and use it once you arrive on station or once you boot up the game. And dock and learn to dock, which is fun, and flight assist off. That is all for today. Thank you, commanders, for joining and supporting the fight for the headquarters of the Pilot Federation. And glory to mankind. Commander Mechan, over and out.